My name is Mara L. Whitfield, and I am 36 years old. It started the way every forced celebration had started for the last few years, with me arriving early and already bracing myself for the role I knew I'd be assigned. Tight smiles, clipped greetings, and that familiar pressure in my chest that came from showing up somewhere I was expected to carry, but never to belong. It was my mom's 61st birthday, and I knew before I even parked the car exactly what would be waiting for me inside. Chauffeur, caterer, emotional punching bag, and if the night went the way it usually did, the unspoken ATM. I got there 20 minutes early because my mom asked me to. I told myself maybe this time would be different. Maybe I'd walk in and just be a guest. That hope lasted about 10 seconds. I hadn't even taken my coat off when she pointed toward the kitchen and said the deviled eggs weren't chilled enough. No hello, no thanks for coming early, just instructions. I moved automatically, setting down my bag, adjusting trays, wiping a counter that was already clean. It felt muscle deep, the kind of reflex you don't even notice anymore. Kyle wasn't there yet, of course. That never mattered. When he finally showed up 40 minutes late, no apology, no explanation, the room practically lit up. My mom rushed over to hug him. My dad pulled out a chair like royalty had arrived. Someone made a joke about traffic. Laughter followed. I kept carrying appetizers from the kitchen to the table like background scenery in a party I was quietly funding. No one offered to help. No one said thank you. Kyle made a crack about how I still loved playing servant, and for a split second I waited. I waited for my mom to tell him to knock it off. I waited for my dad to say that wasn't funny. I waited for anyone to notice how far it had gone. No one did. My mom laughed. My dad kept eating. An aunt mumbled something about how I'd always been good with my hands. I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing, because if they knew how many of their bills those hands had paid, the joke would have landed differently. Dinner started, and I took my usual seat at the corner of the table next to a cousin I barely knew. My mom gave her speech, the same one she gave every year. She cried halfway through, talked about how grateful she was for this family, this life, this beautiful home. She didn't mention the $25,000 I loaned them last year when the bank nearly foreclosed. She didn't mention the night I emptied my emergency fund so their car wouldn't be repossessed. She didn't mention the years of quiet help that kept everything standing. Then she looked directly at me. "You're here out of courtesy," she said, her voice steady, practiced. "Not because you matter." There was no pause, no hesitation, no sign she realized what she'd just done. The words landed flat and sharp at the same time, like she'd been waiting to say them. Kyle didn't miss a beat. He laughed and added, "At least they let you in." A few people shifted uncomfortably. Someone cleared their throat. Then someone changed the subject, and just like that, the moment passed, at least for everyone else. I stayed for dessert. I complimented the lemon cake. I even drove my aunt home afterward because I was raised to be polite, to smooth things over, to not make scenes. But as I backed out of my parents' driveway that night, something inside me settled into a quiet, irreversible place. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised. I was done pretending this was normal. 4 days later, their joint account locked. They found out when my mom tried to buy groceries and her card declined. Then the electric company called. Then the internet cut out. Then my dad's cell service dropped. I didn't warn them. I didn't explain. That account had my name on it for one reason only, to make sure their essentials were covered. But they made it very clear I was just a courtesy. So I took mine elsewhere. The lawyer's letter went out next. Certified, return receipt requested. It outlined the $25,000 loan I'd made on January 14th of the previous year, with a simple agreement signed by both of them stating repayment within 18 months. 18 months had passed. No payments, no attempts, just excuses and silence. I gave them 15 business days to respond. They didn't take it seriously. On day 16, I got an email from my mom that said, "This is very hurtful. I never thought you'd stoop this low. We're family." No mention of the money. No attempt to make things right. Just guilt wrapped in a lazy sentence that probably took her 3 minutes to write. I didn't reply. Instead, I called Rachel, the attorney I'd quietly hired a month earlier, just in case they tried to drag this out. I filed the paperwork the next day. $25,000 in a formal civil complaint, plus legal costs and late fees. Every document was in order. Wire transfers, signed agreements, screenshots of texts where my mom promised they'd pay me back before Christmas. That Christmas had been 2 years ago. The court date was set for 3 weeks out. I didn't tell anyone. I went to work like nothing was happening. I slept badly. My chest hurt in the mornings. I started jogging just to burn off the anger. 10 days before the hearing, my mom posted a photo of her and my dad on the front porch, holding mugs like they were in a Hallmark movie. The caption read, "Some storms come to clear the path. Let go. Let God." People commented about strength and forgiveness. I almost laughed. Forgiveness to them meant pretending the last 2 decades didn't happen. The morning of the hearing, I wore black. Not to make a statement. I just didn't feel like pretending anymore. They were already seated when I walked into the courthouse, my parents side by side, like this was just another appointment they planned to charm their way through. My mom smiled at me, as if we'd run into each other at the grocery store. My dad gave a slow nod, the kind that used to mean everything was fine, that we were still playing the same quiet family game where no one said the truth out loud. Kyle wasn't there. I noticed that immediately. He never showed up when things required accountability. They didn't bring a lawyer. That should have been my first clue that they still didn't understand how serious this was. All they had was a manila folder that looked like it had been sitting in a drawer since the 90s, edges bent, papers sticking out at odd angles. I sat down across the aisle, alone, hands folded, heart pounding in a way that surprised me. I wasn't scared of the judge. I was scared of how little they seemed to care. When the case was called, we stood. The judge asked for documentation. My parents shuffled through their folder, pulling out screenshots of vague text messages, a few bank statements with parts circled in pen, and then, unbelievably, a handwritten note claiming I had offered the money as a gift in the spirit of family reconciliation. No dates, no signatures, no agreement, just words they hoped would be enough, because words always had been before. I handed over my documents without a word. Wire transfers with timestamps, the signed repayment agreement in black ink, repayment due within 18 months, screenshots of messages where my mom wrote, "We'll pay you back before Christmas, don't worry." The judge asked which Christmas. My mom hesitated. My dad cleared his throat. They couldn't answer. They tried to talk around it. My mom said the agreement was symbolic, that families don't keep score. My dad said they were shocked I would hold them to it, like my expectation of being repaid was the real betrayal. The judge didn't care. She cared about contracts, evidence, and timelines. She ruled in my favor without drama. Full repayment of $25,000, plus court fees and interest. They had 30 days to pay or face collections. I didn't look at them as I walked out. I didn't need to. I felt lightheaded, like the air outside was thinner somehow. That night, I removed my name from every account, login, and subscription they were using. Phone plans, internet, utilities, even the streaming services I'd set up years ago when they couldn't figure out the passwords. I closed the shared credit card I'd opened just in case, the one they used to order dinner 3 times a week. I changed my number and blocked them everywhere except email. 2 days later, Kyle texted me from a new number. "You really nuked everything. You know they're not okay, right?" I stared at the screen for a long moment and then put the phone face down. The truth was, I wasn't okay either. I hadn't been for years, but I was finally done pretending that my pain didn't count. 10 days passed. Then my mom posted another photo. Her and my dad sitting on the porch, mugs in hand, smiling softly. The caption said, "Some storms come to clear the path. Love always wins." The comments were full of sympathy and vague spiritual encouragement. I almost admired how easily she could rewrite reality if enough people were watching. 3 weeks after the ruling, I came home on a Friday night and saw it. Red spray paint, cheap and dripping, slashed across my front door. One word, all caps, centered perfectly. Fool. I sat in my car with the engine off and just stared at it through the windshield. Not fear, something colder, something like confirmation. I lived in a quiet suburb. No teenagers tagging houses, no break-ins. Nothing like this had ever happened on my street. I took photos for documentation and stood there a while longer, letting the silence settle. They wanted me to see it. That much was obvious. Inside, I opened my laptop and didn't have to scroll far. My mom had already posted a photo of it, taken from the same angle, the same lighting, clearly before I got home. "Sad to see this kind of hatred in the world," she wrote. "Someone in our daughter's neighborhood got tagged. Be safe out there, friends." People commented about how awful it was. One woman wrote, "Sometimes you reap what you sow." My mom hearted that comment. That's when I knew it wasn't just her. It was all of them. I didn't respond. Not publicly, not privately. I waited. Waiting turned out to be the hardest part, not because I was unsure, but because I finally understood what they were trying to do. They didn't want to scare me. They wanted to mark me, to make sure every time I walked up to my own front door, I remembered my place. Fool. It was meant to stick, to burrow under my skin and live there, long after the paint was gone. I cleaned it myself the next morning, not because I was ashamed, but because I refused to let it greet me every time I came home. As I scrubbed, neighbors slowed their cars, some pretending not to stare, others offering quick, awkward sympathy. I nodded, thanked them, kept working. I didn't explain. I didn't need to. The explanation was already out there, carefully curated by my mother's posts and Kyle's quiet comments. For a few days, nothing happened. No calls, no texts, no more social media posts pretending concern. It was almost peaceful, except for the way my phone buzzed late one night with a message from Kyle that read, "Saw Mom's post. Crazy stuff. Hope you're good." Hope you're good. As if hope was something you could offer without accountability. I didn't reply. Then I noticed something else. A blurry photo appeared on a neighborhood Facebook page, taken from across the street. My house, my door. The word fool still faintly visible before I'd scrubbed it away. The caption said, "This is getting out of hand." The comments spiraled fast. People speculated, people judged. A few asked why someone would target that house specifically. No one said my name, but it was implied everywhere. I knew then that the vandalism wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a narrative they were building, one where I was unstable, vindictive, ungrateful. The kind of story that makes people stop asking questions. I let it breathe for a week, watched my mother post vague spiritual quotes about trials and tests, watched Kyle like one or two comments that painted me as dramatic without ever saying it outright. They thought subtlety would protect them. 2 weeks after the door incident, I made my move. I didn't rush it. I waited for a Friday night, parked my car a few streets away, and walked the rest of the distance. I knew their cameras were fake. I'd bought them years ago when my dad insisted they needed security, but didn't want to pay for installation. The house was quiet, porch light off, curtains drawn. I didn't hesitate. On the side of their garage, the one facing the street where joggers passed every morning, I wrote the truth. Foolish hypocrite parents who use their daughter for money. I took my time, each word deliberate. Underneath, I added one more line. Ask them about the $25,000. I was gone before sunrise. By 7 a.m., the neighborhood group chat was on fire. Someone posted a photo. Someone else said it didn't look random. Another commented that it sounded personal. My mom tried to get ahead of it, posting a photo of the new graffiti herself, talking about spiritual attack and forgiveness. This time, it didn't work. The comments were different. Skeptical, curious. One neighbor wrote, "That sounds like someone sending a message." The sympathy evaporated. Kyle liked the post anyway. That should have been the end, but it never is with them. 2 days later, an old friend texted me a link. It was a video, grainy and slow, zooming in on my front door the night it had been painted. A familiar female voice in the background said, "And she wonders why people don't like her." The caption read, "Some people will do anything for attention." It had been posted that morning, weeks after the incident, held back until they thought it would sting the most. I reported it. Nothing happened. That same afternoon, my lawyer called. Her voice was tight. My parents had filed for Chapter 13 bankruptcy. They listed the court-ordered repayment as a dischargeable debt. They were trying to erase it, to rewrite reality one more time. I sat at my kitchen table staring at my phone long after the call ended. The hollow feeling that settled in wasn't anger anymore. It was grief, not for the money. For the parents I kept hoping would show up instead of these people who kept choosing manipulation over truth. That night, a number I didn't recognize called me. I almost ignored it. I'm glad I didn't. "Mara," a familiar voice said. "It's Jack, your uncle." I hadn't spoken to him in nearly a decade. He and my dad had fallen out years ago over money. He'd always been the only one who saw them clearly. "I saw the video," he said. "I called your dad. He hung up on me, so now I'm coming down there." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He told me not to do anything else, to let him handle it. For the first time in a long while, someone wasn't asking me to forgive, or to understand, or to be the bigger person. Someone was just saying enough. When Uncle Jack arrived, he didn't knock gently. He walked in like he'd been waiting years for the chance. "I'm not here to play nice," he said. "I gave them 20 years to grow up. I'm done waiting." He went to their house that evening. I stayed back, parked down the street, watching through the gap in the fence. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see the shapes of them. My mom pacing, my dad leaning on the counter, Jack standing firm. When he came back, it was past midnight. "They're unreachable," he said. "Your dad thinks you're trying to ruin them. Your mom thinks the devil's working through you." I told them the truth. They didn't like it. The next morning, Kyle liked another post. That was when I realized this wasn't about winning or losing anymore. It was about survival, about stepping out of a family story that only worked when I played the villain quietly. I didn't feel proud. I felt tired. But for the first time, I also felt free enough to stop explaining myself. Freedom, I learned, doesn't arrive with fireworks. It shows up as a quiet pause where panic used to live. The morning after Uncle Jack confronted my parents, there was nothing. No new posts, no messages, no calls. It was so quiet it felt suspicious, like the calm before something broke. I went to work, answered emails, nodded through meetings, and pretended I wasn't waiting for the next hit. By evening it came. Not from my parents, from the police. 2 officers stood on my porch just after sunset, calm, professional, hands resting lightly on their belts. One of them asked my name. The other explained that a vandalism complaint had been filed. My parents were claiming I was responsible for the graffiti on their garage. I didn't deny it. I didn't confirm it either. I asked if they had evidence. They didn't. No footage, no witnesses, just speculation, and a long story about a troubled daughter. My lawyer handled the rest over the phone. The officers left with polite nods and nothing to file. The same week, the bankruptcy court responded. My parents' attempt to discharge the $25,000 judgment was denied. The court wasn't impressed by the omissions in their filing or the sudden claim of insolvency that didn't match their spending history. Rachel called it what it was, a last-ditch effort to escape accountability. It failed. That should have been the end of their leverage. Instead, they tried one more angle. An email arrived from my dad, short and sharp. "You got what you wanted. Hope you're proud." No apology, no reflection, just accusation wrapped in resignation. I didn't reply. Pride wasn't what I felt. What I felt was a quiet grief for the parents I kept hoping would appear if I waited long enough. Uncle Jack called again a few days later. He said my parents were spiraling. My dad thought everyone had turned against him. My mom cried constantly and blamed me, the neighbors, the devil, anything but herself. Jack asked if I wanted him to go back over there and try to calm things down. I agreed, not because I thought it would fix anything, but because I was tired of looking over my shoulder. He went the next day, stayed an hour. When he came back, he didn't sugarcoat it. "They don't think they did anything wrong," he said. "They think you betrayed them by refusing to be useful." He paused, then added, "I told them, if they keep pushing, they'll lose the last bit of dignity they have left." That night, I got a text from an unknown number. "This is your mother. We are sorry for how things have been. We won't bother you anymore." No punctuation, no warmth, no accountability, just retreat. I didn't respond. I blocked the number the next morning, not out of anger, out of necessity. I stopped checking their social media. I removed mutual friends. I changed my email address. The distance wasn't just emotional anymore, it was structural, digital, permanent. Uncle Jack stayed with me for 2 weeks. Before he left, he hugged me and said something I didn't know I needed to hear. "They raised you to believe love was conditional. You proved them wrong by leaving." When he drove away, I didn't cry. I just stood there, watching the taillights disappear, feeling lighter than I had in years. The world didn't end. My job didn't suffer. My house didn't fall apart. No lightning struck me down for choosing myself. 3 months passed without drama. No paint, no videos, no calls. I heard through whispers that Kyle had moved back in with my parents, that they stopped going to church, that my mom still told people she didn't know why I snapped. I didn't care. I loved them. That's what made it take so long. But love without respect is just endurance, and I was done enduring. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't rehearsing explanations. I wasn't budgeting my kindness. I was done playing the fool. What surprised me most wasn't how much quieter my life became, but how slowly my body learned to trust that the quiet was real. For years, silence had always meant something bad was coming. A bill, a crisis, a call that started with, "I hate to ask, but..." Now the days passed without interruption, and I found myself bracing for impact that never arrived. I stopped waking up with my jaw clenched. I stopped checking my phone first thing in the morning. I took walks after dinner instead of collapsing on the couch, mentally replaying conversations I wished had gone differently. I didn't realize how much energy I'd spent managing other people's expectations until they were gone. Kyle tried once more, indirectly. A mutual acquaintance mentioned he'd been telling people I'd lost it, that I'd let money turn me cold. The story didn't land the way he expected. Too many details didn't line up. Too many people remembered how often I'd stepped in over the years. The narrative he'd relied on, the one where I was the difficult daughter who needed to be managed, didn't survive contact with facts. I focused on my own life instead. I repainted my living room a soft gray, not because anyone suggested it, but because I liked how it caught the light in the afternoons. I took my daughter to a museum on a random Wednesday and didn't feel guilty for taking time off. We laughed more. She asked fewer questions about why Grandma and Grandpa weren't calling. Kids notice consistency more than absence. One afternoon, I found an old notebook while cleaning out a drawer. Inside were lists I'd made years ago, goals I'd written and crossed out, plans I'd postponed. After things settled down, I'd written more than once. I closed the notebook and realized something simple and devastating. Things were never going to settle down as long as I stayed. That understanding didn't make me bitter. It made me gentle with myself. I stopped expecting closure from people who had never offered accountability. I stopped hoping for apologies that would never come. Instead, I let the absence stand as the answer it always had been. A few months later, my attorney emailed to confirm everything was finalized. No further action. No lingering filings. No surprises. I forwarded the email to a folder labeled Done and didn't open it again. That chapter didn't need rereading. On a quiet Sunday morning, I sat on my porch with coffee and watched my daughter draw with chalk on the sidewalk. She wrote her name in uneven letters, and then mine beside it, looping the letters together like they belonged that way. I realized then that whatever my parents thought they'd taken from me, they hadn't touched the most important thing. I still knew how to build a life that felt safe. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt complete. The last piece didn't arrive with drama. It arrived with clarity. It was a Tuesday evening, ordinary in every way. I had just finished dinner. My daughter was in the other room doing homework, humming to herself, when an email came through from an address I didn't recognize at first. The subject line was simple: I owe you the truth. I almost deleted it without opening it, but something about the timing made me pause. It was from my mother, not the shared family account, not my dad's email, hers alone. She didn't start with guilt this time. No spiritual language, no talk about family unity or betrayal. She wrote plainly, almost carefully, as if each sentence had been weighed before being allowed onto the page. She said she'd been sitting with everything since the bankruptcy filing failed, since Uncle Jack showed up, since the neighbors stopped making eye contact. She admitted finally that the money had never been a misunderstanding, that they had relied on me because it was easier than changing, because I was reliable, because I didn't push back. She wrote that when she told me I was there out of courtesy, she hadn't meant it the way it sounded, but then added a line that mattered more than the excuse. She said she understood now why it sounded exactly the way it did. She admitted that in her mind, my role in the family had slowly shifted from daughter to resource, and she hadn't questioned it because it benefited her. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't ask to meet. She ended the email by saying she would respect my silence if that was what I chose. I sat with that email for a long time. It didn't undo anything. It didn't erase the years of being overlooked, or the humiliation, or the fear. But it was the first time one of them had named the truth without trying to soften it or turn it back on me. I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, but because I didn't need to. Some acknowledgments aren't invitations. They're closures. Life moved forward quietly after that. My parents didn't show up again. Kyle stayed gone. The noise faded completely. In its place, routines formed. Stable ones, predictable ones. I went to work. I came home. I planned trips I could afford without checking anyone else's calendar. I saved money and spent it without explaining myself. I stopped measuring my worth by how useful I was to people who only noticed me when something was breaking. One night, as I tucked my daughter into bed, she asked if we were still a family, even though some people weren't around anymore. I told her the truth in the simplest way I could. I said family is made of people who show up, who are kind, who don't hurt you on purpose and then ask you to pretend it didn't happen. She nodded, satisfied, and rolled over to sleep. That was enough for me. I didn't win anything. I didn't lose anything. I stepped out of a story that was written for me without my consent. I stopped playing the role that required me to disappear so others could feel whole. They called me a fool. But the real foolishness would have been staying.